Hey guys, Snoozy here. Today we're going to be going over the Blizzard Sorceress. It's a really fun build. It's really powerful now that we have the Sunder Charms. We're going to show you generally how I would play it. We're going to show you kind of a hybrid between Vitality and Energy Shield maybe. We're also going to show you some different Magic Find setups if you'd prefer to do that. So, just like with most Sorceress builds here, we're going to have most of our stats into either Strength or Vitality. Or if you're going to be going Energy Shield, it'll be Strength and Energy Shield. As you can see, I have 201 Strength here. That's too high. Don't worry about that. Mine's just a little bit higher than normal. That way I can swap all these gear sets without having to worry about it too much. So it's going to be important to figure out what kind of gear sets you're swapping to and then kind of math out how much strength you need yourself. So for this one, you're going to want a maximum of 156 strength, and if you're going to be swapping gear sets, you want to make sure you can swap back and forth comfortably without having to respec. So try to get this as close to 156 as possible. We're not going to do any points in the dexterity. This build doesn't need it, especially if you already have your torch and your Annie. You will not need any in here. You'll have enough to use your cold arms if you choose to put it into a flail. For this build, we're going to go pure vitality, so all of your remaining points are going to go into vitality. Now, there is an option to kind of do a hybrid energy shield. That's a lot more complex, requires a lot more gear, and requires levels. So if you're looking at this from like a fresh start, maybe you're late in the ladder, or you're starting a ladder, I highly recommend going straight vitality for this. For the skills, it's pretty simple. We're going to put 1 point into the frozen armor, just like we normally do to get that buff. And for the build, how I play it, we'll generally travel all the way down the cold tree into Frozen Orb and into Cold Mastery. For the lightning, you're always going to do 1 into static. If you are planning on doing the energy shield route, you will path all the way down to energy shield and put 1 point into it. If you are going pure vitality and you have no interest in doing energy shield at all, you can save all of these points from charge bolt, lightning, chain lightning, energy shield. You don't need them. That's 4 points you'll save. Fire, it's always going to be 1 point into warmth at least. As you can see, I have 4 skill points remaining. This is a level 99 character. You could dump these wherever you want realistically, but I chose not to put them in so we don't have any power creep from the extra skill choices. So your first thing you're going to max is going to be your Blizzard. After that, you need to make the decision of, do I want more penetration from the Cold Mastery? Remember, without a Sunder Charm, you will not break a monster's immunity. You need that Sunder Charm, or some specific monsters can be broken with lower resistance or an infinity. However, a lot of cold immunes cannot be broken. So generally, I would choose either between if I want single target or AoE. If this is a fresh ladder start, I would choose the single target, so I would end up maxing Ice Blast next as my second, then moving to Glacial Spike, and then into Ice Bolt. Now, once you get your Sunder Charm, you can make the decision of how much you actually want to put into here. It's really important to note that anything after negative 195 to a monster's resistance is absolutely pointless, and this is including your facets. So please do not go over negative 195 with your enemy mastery. And do not go off of what the cold mastery says. Instead, go into here, into your stats. You can click the advanced stats button and look for the minus 195 to enemy cold resistance, because this build does use facets to also drop the resistance of monsters. So you're going to want to balance this out. Once you have those maxed, if you are choosing to go the energy shield route, you will max telekinesis. Telekinesis is the synergy to energy shield. You have to put hard points in there, plus skills will not help. So if you are going energy shield, you'll max telekinesis. If you are not, what I like doing is maxing orb, since we're already maxing ice bolt. Orb has a lot of single target damage since it can shotgun, but realistically, it's up to you. If you don't want to go orb, I have seen other people splash into the fire and go with like a Hydra or something like that. It's really up to you. Blizzard by itself can pretty much clear almost all the content. With the skills out of the way there, we're going to go ahead and talk about your breakpoints. Your faster cast rate is the important one. As you can see, I have 115. This is 10% over what I need. And this is mostly just because the amulet I gave myself to let me show you the gear sets quickly. You only need 105 faster cast rate. And this is going to be with every gear set I'm going to show you going forward. So make sure you're hitting that 105 as you swap the gear out. Your faster hit recovery, you'll get the 55 from the spirit. If possible, you're going to want to use some charms. Maybe you'll get skillers, faster hit recoveries, or you'll use some small charms and try to get that up even higher. I think it's 86 is what you're going to want to aim for. But realistically, I'm a very lazy player. I never really worry about that. I just leave it at 55. But if you want to min-max, try to go up at least 2 more breakpoints if possible. But it starts getting expensive trying to do that. So let's go ahead and get into the gear here. It's a pretty standard setup. We're going to be use the Death's Fathom. It gives you that 3 to sorceress skills and the 20 faster cast rate, and then most importantly, the cold skill damage. This rolls between a 15 and 30%. This does have the facet in there. If you're not familiar with the facets, these are what they are. They're the rainbow facet jewels. They give the minus 5% to enemy cold resistance and plus 5% to cold skill damage. They roll between -3 and plus 5. So you don't necessarily have to get them as when you die. I personally don't pay more for the die ones because I don't care. I don't play on the die, so it doesn't matter to me. The other stuff that'll change is the lightning and fire resistance. You know, if you get offered 2 Fathoms that are identical, but the fire resistance is higher on one, I would personally take the fire resistance one. This is due to the Spirit Monarch that we use not having fire resistance. However, the resistances are such minor things on here, you're mostly going to look at cold skill damage. For the helmet, we're going to be using the Nightwing Veil Spired Helm. This will give you the +2 to all skills that we're going to be looking for, the 15% cold skill damage on a maximum roll 1, and it gives you some dex and some other nice skills. This also has the rainbow facet in there, which is why it's the 20% cold skill damage and the -5 to enemy cold resistance. Before I show the amulet, I want to really stress that this amulet's absolutely ridiculous. This was a hacked amulet back in the Lord of Destruction days. I do not think you'll ever find anything even remotely close to this in live. However, I'm using it as an example because it lists all the stats that are really good for you on an amulet. This amulet is 100% not needed, and it's very, very insane. So this is the Armageddon Fletch amulet. This was a highly hacked, duped amulet back in the Lord of Destruction days. All the stats on there are things that are really good for you. The important thing here is to make sure you're hitting your breakpoints. If you're hitting your breakpoints, you don't need any more faster cast rate. So for ours, as you can see, with the current gear that we're wearing, we're hitting 115. I could lose 10% faster cast rate here and still be fine, meaning that this could be 2 to sorceress, 10% faster cast rate, and I'd still hit my breakpoint, and it's a perfectly good amulet to use. The other option is if you do not want to use something like this, an amulet, maybe you just want to go with Mara's because you can't go wrong with it, right? 2 to all skills, and you're going to get the all resistance here. This is the Mara's amulet. Maybe you want to use this instead. Perfectly acceptable. However, if you don't have the 10% faster cast rate on your amulet, you'll have to make it up by getting rid of a Stone of Jordan. You'll need a 10% faster cast rate ring in one of the slots. So for your accessories like your amulet or your rings, you'll need 10% faster cast rate in one of them. Realistically, that can be up to you. Personally, I would try to aim to get it on the amulet because, as you can see, these things can get absolutely insane. Again, you 100% do not need this amulet. For the shield, like we talked about, pretty standard for sorceresses using a one-handed orb. We're going to go with the Spirit Monarch. It's too hard to pass up the 2 to all skills 35% faster cast rate. Now, please remember that the 35% faster cast rate is a perfect roll, and it will range from 25 to 35. So watch your faster cast rate breakpoint closely. If needed, you can make up this extra faster cast rate in your rings or amulet slots. For our gloves here, we're going to go ahead and use Trangs. You could also use Mage Fist. Realistically, what we're looking for here is the 20 to faster cast rate. However, I'm using Trangs because of that 30% cold resistance. Since I am using a Sunder Charm, it really helps boost up your resistances. For the rings, we're going to use Sojas or faster cast rate rings. you could do something like this. These aren't necessarily the best for what we're building, but strength, life, resistance is always good. Cast rate, it's okay. So something with cast rate, maybe some life, mana, resistances, magic find, strength if you need it. Really any of that stuff would fit in that slot. We're going to be using an Arachnid Mesh Spiderweb Sash. This will give you your $1 skills and the 20% faster cast rate. And it does have that nice increased maximum mana by 5% if you are going Energy Shield. For your boots, we're going to be using the War Travelers. I just really enjoy these boots because they're pretty easy to get. You get the Magic Find and the Strength and Vitality, which is super helpful. However, if you're looking for best in slot, something like this is going to be your best in slot. You're going to want the Tri-Res on them mostly. You could, if you really wanted to, not have the faster run walk or the faster hit recovery or strength, just Tri-Res. Those would be the lower end. Personally, I would try for faster run walk and Tri-Res, but these can get pretty insane. So just try to stay within your budget. There's really no need for these, in my opinion, unless you're really struggling with resistances, which could be a possibility depending on which gear route you want to go on. The reason I left the chest piece last is because you have a lot of different options here. Personally, I prefer Chains of Honor. I know it's not very popular anymore. A lot of people consider it a waste of a burn. However, you do get 2 to all skills, 20 strength, 65 to all resistances, physical damage reduced by 8%, and 25 magic find. Not needed though. If you want more damage, you could use an Ormus Robe Blizzard. That'll give you a 20% cold damage if you get a perfect roll. You can put the facet in there, so you also get the -5 to resistances, and you'll get 3 to Blizzard. On top of that, you're getting the 20% faster cast rate, which is going to make hitting those breakpoints a lot easier. Now, maybe with that Ormus on, you're going to realize, oh man, my resistances are low. Because if you're not using the Chains of Honor, you're missing 65 to all res. The budget option is going to be a well-rolled Skin of the Viper Magi. This is a perfect one socketed with an Rune. So as you can see, the Runes do give armors plus 15 to all res. So this will give you 50 to all res. You're only getting 1 skill, but you're getting 30% faster cast rate, which means that you can be really flexible with a lot more of your slots. You might not actually need to use Trangs if you're, using cast rate rings. You can really move stuff around a lot more. And this is a lot more of a budget option. Personally, I would probably use the Skin of the Viper Magi all the way up until I have everything else in my build, and then maybe upgrade into the Chains of Honor. Again, you can do any of these. They're all good options. It just really depends on what your gear and inventory is going to be. For this, we're going to be obviously using a Cold Sunder. For those of you not familiar, the Cold Sunder will set any cold immune monsters resistance to 95. This is why I was talking about earlier in the video that there's no point in having anything over negative 195 for minus to enemy resistances. Because any immune monsters will be set to 95, and then if you take 195 off of that, that'll push the monster to a negative 100. Negative 100 is the lowest you can possibly push the resistances of a monster. So going anything higher than that's not needed. Over here, we're going to be using Cold Life Skillers. If you are trying to hit the faster hit recovery breakpoints, you could replace these with a Cold Skill and faster hit recovery instead of life. You're going to use a Torch and a Nanny, just like every build ever. Don't break the bank on these. I mean, they're really nice to look at and seeing, oh, it's a Sorceress, it's a 2020, that's amazing. Honestly, just get the best one you can afford without breaking the bank, in my opinion. Especially Annies, they're not super rare. And if you play a lot, you'll eventually get Diablo to spawn. You can also join some of the Discords and stuff that have people letting you know when the planned Diablos are. So I wouldn't break the bank for either of these personally. Down here, these are the 20 to life, 5 to all resistance small charms. These 100% are not needed. You can min-max whatever. You could just do resistances down here, even if they're single, maybe 11 to cold, whatever you need. If you're really not worried about resistances, you could put Magic Find down here. You could even put some faster hit recovery ones down here. That way you can hit some higher breakpoints if you want. These are all completely optional on what you really want to put down here. For our mercenary, we're going to be going with the standard Indariel's Head. For both the head and the fortitude, these should both be ethereal if you're looking for best in slot. Personally, I never pay for ethereal and Ariel's Visages. I just don't think it's worth the money. I have better things I can spend my currency on. You're going to stock at this with a Rao rune. If you're a high-end player with a lot of currency, you could do something like a 15 to attack speed, 30 fire res jewel, or something like that, and put it in here. Personally, I always just use Rao runes because it's way cheaper. Your fortitude is going to be the best in slot here. This should be ethereal if you're going to only use it on a mercenary. If you're switching between like maybe another character that does use fortitude, maybe like a Fury Druid or a Boson or something like that, putting a non-ethereal one on here isn't the worst thing ever. It still works. If you can't afford a fortitude or you don't see the reason to upgrade, you can use a treachery here. That's still what I use on pretty much all of my mercenaries. I'm usually very, very late to the game on purchasing a fortitude for my mercenaries, especially on sorceresses, since we do have teleport to help us get them around and keep them out of danger. For this build, we're going to be using Insight for the meditation aura. Realistically, there's no point, in my opinion, of using an Infinity on a cold sorceress, because with the Sunder Charms, you're already making sure they're not immune. Infinity can't break most cold immunes in the game anyways, and because we have enough points for the cold mastery, we're always pushing them to a negative 100, so I don't recommend an Infinity here. I would stick with a simple Insight. On top of that, we're going to have the couple different gear sets like I was talking about here. So one of the other things you can do is you can switch over into the Magic Find setup. So something like this is how I would start, and let's look at our cast rate. So we do have too much cast rate here. Realistically, that means I could drop this amulet and not have any cast rate on it, and then I could put Naggles here on my rings if I really wanted to do like maximum Magic Find. So the gear that I've equipped here for the first kind of Magic Find, and personally this is the kind of Magic Find I stick to. I'm not a huge fan of the Tal Rasha set, especially because if I'm doing Magic Find runs, it's usually in the beginning of the ladder. And if you pay attention, you know, the first week, Tal armors are costing burns pluses in crazy amounts. But if you get to like week 2 or week 3, like they start dropping steadily. So I don't like paying that high upfront cost. I would rather stick with a setup like this using an Oculus. The Istrun is really if you're just pushing Magic Find and you're sure you're going to Magic Find for a long time. An Istrun in the Oculus is not needed. Generally, I never do this. However, I just wanted to show you the best way of doing it. We're going to use a Harlequin Crest Shaco with an Istrun in there. Again, I never ist these. I always used a Perfect Topaz. And then Sculptor's Ire will be the armor here. And again, I never ist this. I use a Perfect Topaz. So if you look at the difference here is an Istrun. So for the weapons, it's a 30% Magic Find, right? Let's look at the Perfect Topaz. Add 1 to 40 lightning damage. So if you really want Magic Find in that Oculus, Ist is going to be your best option. You could also kind of luck into maybe a rare jewel with some Magic Find on it, but Ist will give you the most. And the difference between a Perfect Topaz and an Ist really drops outside of weapons. So armor, helms, and shields, 25% better chance of getting magic items, right? So armor and helmets, 24% chance of getting magic items. So you're paying an Istrun essentially for 1% Magic Find. Unless you're doing a lot of Magic Find, personally, I do not think that's worth it. You can be the judge of that. I don't know what you guys are running. I personally P Topaz. Shields would be the other example of if you really want more Magic Find, you need to use an Istrun or a Jewel, because a Perfect Topaz in the shield gives the 40 to lightning res. So if you look at our gear, we did hit our breakpoint of the 105 is what you need to aim for, not the 125. So the other gear set that we use, I'm just going to keep moving my gear sets down here, is going to be the full Tal Rasha set is another option. This is a really popular one around the ladder reset. I'm not a huge fan of it, personally. And if you look at it, we do hit the 105 cast rate with this gear. However, keep in mind, I am using the full set, which does give you some of these cast rate, as you can see here, from the green text. If I move my cursor down there, it'll go away. But the green text is like the partial completion. And you're seeing we're getting 30 from that. So that's how realistically we're really getting up there. with a magic find. So we're just scraping by with the bottom that we can get for our cast rate, which is really good. And the full Tau set, we are getting, you know, the complete 75 to all res. But, however, notice we're only pushing negative 175 to enemy cold resistance. So if you were planning on using the Tau set and you were going to be farming where there are cold immunes, you're going to want to put a little bit more in the cold mastery for this. So these builds and these setups really depend on exactly what you're trying to do. If you're just running Mephisto all day, you don't really need to worry about hitting 195. Or I'm sorry, 105 faster cast rate. No, I'm sorry. You don't need 195 for the cold mastery. You still want the 105. However, on league starts, you can get to Mephisto. It's just a little bit dicey with less than 105 cast rate. A lot of the times on league starts, I'm actually making it down there with the Spirit Sword. And I don't even have Spirit Monarch yet, usually. My armor's P Topaz, my helmet's P Topaz. It's a mess. You can still get there without the 105 faster cast rate to Meph. It's just really, really dicey. So now that we have our gear back on, we can go ahead and start getting into how it actually plays. So there are a couple things that I really want to get to before we actually start fighting anything. And that's going to be if we look at our cold skills here. Notice how Ice Blast says it'll freeze your enemy. And then Glacial Spike says that it freezes or kills nearby enemies. So the difference here is if I'm trying, let's say my mercenary here is the monster, I would Ice Blast him. He would take more damage and he would get frozen. If there's a bunch more monsters around him, right, I would use something like a Glacial Spike over here. A Glacial Spike would hit him and then it would do a little AoE around him, freezing everything. And that's nice because then you can drop a Blizzard on top of them and they're not running out of it. For our swap, of course, we're going to be using the Call to Arms if you can afford it, with a Spirit Monarch. The faster cast rate roll on this does not matter for your offhand. Honestly, just get a cheap 25 one if you can, or honestly, what I end up doing is I just keep using whatever is in my offhand to keep re-rolling them as I get Spirit Rune sets, hoping to get a 35, and then if I get a 35, I sell it off if I don't need it. So one of the things you want to make sure that you do, and all my key bindings are messed up again, I'm not quite sure why. You want to make sure that you get both you and your mercenary set and buffed up. You're going to want to make sure that your key bindings are ready to go, which they aren't. Everything is wrong. That should be good enough. So you'll teleport down, and this is already on players 8, so this is as if I was running with 7 other players in the game and they were just essentially doing nothing. Remember, for my build, I did end up maxing the orb because I wasn't planning on going energy shield. So you have hefty damage. You know, your orb is the 1.4k and your blizzard's about 14k. And then keep in mind, you are reducing every single monster in the game to negative 100 resistances. So they're taking even more damage than normal. And the one thing that you want to also keep doing for safety is using that Glacial Spike on packs of monsters. Seeing how they're getting frozen, they're not attacking, they're not draining mana, you know, they're just chilling there inside of the blizzard waiting to die. You cast Orb and you can cast your Glacial Spike as you go. The one thing that I don't like about the Vitality builds is they do use a little bit more potions than I like to use. That's generally why I lean towards the Energy Shield route, because with the Energy Shield route, you don't have to really worry about your life or your mana once you're geared. They'll just always be topped off. The Mercenary for this, by the way, I didn't specifically say that. It was on the screen, though. We are using a Might Mercenary just so he gets a little bit more damage. You could use something like a Holy Freeze Mercenary. That way they're actually slowing and freezing as well. But between the orbs going out, the Glacial Spikes, the Blizzards, and stuff like that, everything's usually chilled anyways. The other option is you could go with something like a Prayer Mercenary. And with that Prayer Mercenary, you would be pretty set. You do have a higher life pool than the Energy Shield one, so it would take longer to regen, but you would slowly get your health back up. I'm actually not going to static, just so you can see the single target damage that we do have coming out of here. But generally, you would static the Diablo here. And remember, this is a player 8. You would Ice Blast for your single target damage as well in between. It is a little weird trying to get orbs and the Ice Blast out there, but it is something you can do. It's not necessary. So that is the Blizzard Sorceress in a full vitality. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it, and do keep in mind if you are swapping gear sets to keep an eye on your strength. Make sure your strength's always that 156 when you swap gear sets, that way you can wear that spirit. And even more importantly, when you're swapping gear sets, make sure you're always hitting that 105 faster cast rate breakpoint, or else you're going to have a really bad time with your teleporting. So if there's any questions, please ask in the comments. I try to answer every question. On top of that, on East Coast time, I do try to stream every day 5 to 7. That usually doesn't happen. I'm usually missing a day here and there, but it's a good place to come in and you can ask your questions and I'll answer them in real time. It doesn't even have to be something with a guide. It can be a general question. I'll try to answer it the best I can. So that's the guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys learned something. Let me know if there's anything I can clarify in the comments, and have a good day.